Just a quick note before we begin, this video is specifically about the Raven Taylor Hales Brethren group rather than all the other Brethren groups. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. Welcome to the basic facts of the exclusive Brethren cult. Let's start with a rule called shutting up. The Brethren group started when a group of Protestants became dissatisfied with the church, stating that it was becoming just like the Catholic Church. This subset group we're covering was founded around 1890 in Britain, with Frederick Raven, a secretary of the Royal Naval College, being the first of many leaders. Raven would teach his followers separatism, which is the belief that in order to have a unity with God, you had to separate yourself from the world because the world is sinful. By 1910, a majority of the members would migrate to the United States, where a man named James Taylor would take leadership. Taylor would state that he was chosen by God to lead the group because he was chosen to interpret biblical truths. And because of that, Taylor would tell members that they're not allowed to read the Bible anymore, but instead his interpretations of it, which he called the ministry books. Members were also not allowed to be involved in politics because it was considered a sin, and they would be told that at the end of the world, it wouldn't matter anyway. Female members aren't allowed to have any authority in the group, and during sermons, they have to sit behind male members and remain quiet the entire time. The most controversial rule would be used now, called shutting up, where if a member questions the beliefs or breaks a rule, they will be completely isolated from the group, including not being allowed to speak to anyone, even their family members, and if they continue to question or break rules, they'll be kicked out of the group. No pets allowed. When a member leaves or is kicked out of the group, they have to leave not only their job and their homes, but also their family, which includes their children. In 1953, Taylor would die, and his son James Taylor Jr. would take over the group, claiming he was a sinless man. Over the next 10 years, Jr. would make even more strict rules concerning how members were allowed to dress, conduct business, banning facial hair on male members, forbidding members from going to college, as well as eating and socializing with anyone outside the group, including family members. Members were now forbidden from joining any outside associations, and marriages between members and non-members were no longer allowed, and if they were already married, they were forced to get a divorce. Children in the group were now being told what they would do for a living and even who they would marry. Dating within the group consists of couples not being allowed to touch and even having to be chaperoned everywhere. After having children, women are no longer allowed to work, and they have to stay home and raise the children. Members are also not allowed to watch TV or listen to the radio, and male members are not allowed to wear shorts, while female members aren't allowed to cut their hair. During this time, a great number of members would leave and join other Brethren groups that still existed that had less strict rules. Recruitment is rare, but when it does happen, it usually happens because of the group's street preachers. In 1964, Jr. would make another rule that no one was allowed to have pets because they distracted from God, and people who did have pets were made to put their pets down. Roger Paynes. At this time, people who left or were kicked out of the group were treated with great cruelty. Members were told that these people chose the devil over God and that they would try to make them do the same. Former members who have left have stated that they had a very hard time adjusting to the outside world, some having even taken their own life. In 1970, Jr. would stay with a Brethren family in Aberdeen, Scotland, for a 3-day meeting with groups of members where Junior would be drunk and end up having sex with a member's wife. The next day at one of his meetings, Junior was very drunk again. This time he was cursing and insulting members in his sermon. Members were later told that Junior's behavior was a test of faith and loyalty to the group, but many members would leave, and those who refused to support him any longer were kicked out of the group. That same year, Junior would die due to complications of alcoholism. A pig farmer from North Dakota named James Symington would take over leadership. In 1974, a member named Roger Paynes would be shut up for several months after wrongfully shutting up another member. He would end up killing his wife and 3 children, then himself. Political involvement. In 1987, Symington would die of diabetes, and a furniture salesman named John Hales would take over leadership. In the 1990s, the group would establish their own private schools called One School Global for Brethren children between the ages of 8 and 18. And it's worth noting that the Australian schools are partially funded by the Australian government. Teachers at these schools are not Brethren members because members aren't allowed to go to college to get an education degree. With that said, former teachers have come forward to state that the schools are brainwashing the children so that the church has complete control over them. In 1993, evidence would begin to surface that showed the group's higher-ups were secretly involved in politics, which goes against their rules. In 1997, a former member made a website where former members could contact each other, but soon after, the creator was faced with a defamation lawsuit from the church. This would be settled out of court and the website would be taken down. In 2002, Hales would die and his son Bruce would take over leadership. In 2004, the group would be linked to political advertisements for re-election of Australian Prime Minister John Howard. In response to the advertisements, Hales would reverse the long-standing rule on political involvement and begins to encourage members to support conservative political causes. Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. In 2005, the group would attempt to influence a ban on gay marriage in Canada by starting a campaign under the label of Concerned Canadian Parents. They would use direct mail and a full-page ad in a newspaper, but this would backfire on them, causing members to have to go in front of cameras at a press conference to explain the false label. This would propel the group into the spotlight. In March of 2006, members placed advertisements and distributed leaflets attacking the Australian Tasmanian Greens, an environmental group in the Tasmanian state election. By 2007, evidence would surface that the group had spent millions in donations in the past to overseas and U.S. elections to ensure that conservatives would win the elections. In 2012, the group would rename themselves Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. The group is still active today. In 2022, an investigator named David Wallace is hired by the group to find former member Robert Marsh. Marsh was kicked out of the group for breaking the shutting up rule and whistleblowing Deeprox, a company that is owned by the group that Marsh claims is fraudulent. But when Wallace found Marsh, instead of bringing him to the group, he helped Marsh compile several of thousands of emails and other documents called the Klondike Papers, where evidence states that the group is the puppet master of the Canadian government. The group is still very active today, with most of its members in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and North America. And the group owns over 1,000 businesses just in the UK. Some of the businesses that they are involved with include Air New Zealand, Office Max, Freightways, and Campus & Co supermarkets. In all of their businesses, the group makes around $6.2 billion a year. The group makes this much because their businesses donate a majority of their income to the church, with donations totaling around $100 million a year. Former members state that the group is still hiring private detectives to conduct surveillance on former members who are speaking out about the group. Former members have also spoken out about child abuse within the group. Even one member came forward and stated she had been raped by another member, and then she was kicked out for speaking up about it. And the majority of court cases against the group today are custody battles from former members trying to get their children back. But whether or not you believe that the group is a billion-dollar scheme or a group that actually believes the outside is sinful, you now know the basic facts of the Exclusive Brethren cult. Thanks for watching.